It was a warm afternoon in a quiet town when Officer Daniel Briggs drove his patrol car down Maple Street. The sun was bright, the sky clear, and everything looked peaceful. But inside Daniel's heart, there was no peace. He had a habit of judging people by how they looked. He believed he could tell who was good or bad just by their skin or clothes. He was proud of his job, but deep down, he had forgotten what it really meant to serve and protect on. As he passed the small neighborhood park, something caught his eye. A young black girl sat alone on a swing, holding a small backpack in her lap. She looked about 9 or 10 years old. Her legs barely reached the ground as she rocked gently. To anyone else, it was a simple, innocent picture. But to Daniel, his old bias made him suspicious. He frowned and thought, why is she here alone? Where are her parents? He parked his patrol car nearby and stepped out. The little girl looked up at him and smiled politely. "Hello, officer," she said softly. Her voice was sweet and calm. Daniel didn't smile back. "What are you doing here alone?" he asked sharply. "I'm waiting for my brother," she said. "He works close by. He's coming to get me." Daniel didn't believe her. He noticed her small backpack and asked, "What's in the bag?" She opened it quickly to show him. Inside were a sandwich, a water bottle, and a small drawing book filled with colorful sketches. "I was drawing while I waited," she explained, her little hands shaking slightly. But Daniel's mind was already filled with doubt. He had heard on the radio earlier about a young suspect involved in a store theft nearby. The description mentioned a black youth wearing dark clothes. Even though that description could fit dozens of people, he decided she matched it. His tone grew harder. "Stand up," he ordered. "You'll come with me." The little girl's eyes widened. "But I didn't do anything," she said. Daniel's face stayed cold. "We'll see about that. You can explain at the station." People in the park started to watch. A few parents whispered, wondering what was happening. A man near the benches called out, "She's just a kid." But Daniel ignored them. He grabbed her wrist, not roughly enough to hurt her, but enough to make her afraid. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Please, sir. My brother's coming. He'll tell you." Daniel didn't listen. He led her to his car and made her sit in the back seat. The little girl's name was Amara. She was quiet and polite, even as she cried softly. Daniel felt a small twinge of guilt, but he pushed it away. He told himself he was just doing his job, dotted the police station. The sergeant on duty looked surprised when Daniel walked in with the small child. "What's going on here?" he asked. "Possible suspect," Daniel said shortly. "Matches a report from earlier this week." The sergeant frowned. "She's a child, Briggs. You sure about this?" Daniel nodded stiffly. Better safe than sorry. Amara sat quietly on a bench in the corner. Her feet dangled, her eyes red from crying. She held her little drawing book tightly, as if it could protect her. One of the younger officers brought her a bottle of water and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. It'll be okay." Amara nodded but didn't speak. She just kept whispering to herself, "My brother will come. He'll fix this." An hour passed. Daniel sat at his desk, filling out paperwork, pretending not to notice the small girl's silence. But a part of him was uneasy. Something about her calmness, her quiet trust, made him feel small. Then, the door to the station swung open. A tall man in a work uniform rushed in. His face was tense, his hands covered in grease. He looked around quickly. "Where's my sister?" he demanded. "Her name's Amara Brooks. Someone said she was brought here." Daniel stood up, ready to lecture him about respect and patience. But before he could speak, the sergeant stepped forward quickly and said in a shocked voice, "Major Brooks?" The man turned toward the sergeant, recognizing him. "Yeah," he said, still breathing hard. "Sergeant Lewis, right?" I was told my sister was taken here. Daniel blinked in confusion. Major? He repeated quietly. The sergeant nodded firmly. Major Elijah Brooks, U.S. Army Special Forces. Served overseas. 2 silver stars, a bronze star, and a humanitarian medal. The room went silent. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He looked again at the man in front of him, the strong shoulders, the confident eyes, the quiet authority. This was no ordinary worker. This was a hero. Elijah walked past Daniel without even looking at him. He went straight to his sister. When Amara saw him, she jumped up and ran into his arms. Eli, she cried. I told him you were coming. He knelt down, hugging her tightly. It's okay, baby girl. I'm here, he said softly. He looked at the marks where the handcuffs had been on her tiny wrists, and his jaw tightened. The sergeant cleared his throat awkwardly. Officer Briggs, he said quietly, release her, now. Daniel hesitated, then did as told. The cuffs came off, and Amara rubbed her wrists. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came out. He had arrested a decorated war hero's little sister. The shame burned inside him. Elijah stood up and looked at Daniel. His eyes weren't angry. They were calm but full of disappointment. You saw a child and decided she was a suspect because of how she looked, Elijah said quietly. You wear that badge to protect, not to hurt. Daniel lowered his head. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Amara tugged on her brother's sleeve and whispered, Can we go home now? Elijah nodded. He looked at the sergeant and said respectfully, Thank you for taking care of her. I know not everyone here is like that. Then he turned to Daniel one last time and said, You don't owe me an apology. You owe it to yourself to do better. Those words hit Daniel harder than any punishment could. He stood frozen as Elijah led Amara out of the station, her small hand clutching her brother's. The other officers said nothing. Some looked away, some looked disappointed, but everyone knew something important had just happened. When Daniel got home that night, he sat in silence. His badge lay on the table beside him. He stared at it for a long time. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel proud of it. He remembered Amara's scared eyes, Elijah's calm strength, and the sergeant's look of disbelief. He realized that his duty was not about control. It was about trust. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The sound of the little girl's trembling voice echoed in his mind. My brother's coming. He'll fix this. And she had been right. Her brother had not only fixed the mistake, but had opened Daniel's eyes to who he had become. Outside, the streetlights flickered softly. The world was quiet again, but inside Daniel's heart, something had begun to change. For the first time, he understood how wrong he had been. And though the night was long, he knew that when the morning came, he had to find a way to make things right. Daniel woke up early the next morning after a sleepless night. The memories of what he had done to the little girl kept repeating in his head. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her frightened face and her brother's calm, disappointed eyes. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, thinking about how wrong he had been. He had worn the police badge for almost 15 years, but for the first time, he felt ashamed of it. He drove to the station early, long before his shift started. The streets were still quiet, and the sun had just begun to rise. When he entered, the sergeant looked at him, but didn't say much. Everyone at the station had already heard about what happened. The mood around Daniel was different, now colder, distant. He knew he had lost respect. He sat at his desk and tried to work, but the words on the screen blurred. His thoughts kept going back to that little girl, Amara. She had been so gentle, so polite, even when she was scared. And her brother, Elijah, he hadn't shouted, hadn't threatened. He had only said a few simple words. Do better. Those words echoed in Daniel's mind, like a command he couldn't ignore. At lunch break, Daniel searched Elijah's name online. Dozens of news articles came up. He read about a brave soldier who had led rescue missions overseas, saving both civilians and fellow soldiers. Elijah Brooks had once carried 3 wounded men through enemy fire and refused to leave anyone behind. He was honored not just for his bravery, but for his kindness. After retiring, he had returned to his hometown and started a community center to help underprivileged kids. Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. The man he had treated with suspicion was everything a hero should be. And Daniel realized how far he had drifted from what he once wanted to be when he joined the force. That evening, Daniel made a decision. He took his car keys, drove to the other side of town, and parked outside the Brooks Community Youth Center. The building wasn't big, but it was full of life. He could hear laughter inside, children playing, music playing softly in the background. For a few minutes, he just sat there, unsure if he had the courage to walk in. Finally, he took a deep breath and stepped through the door. The laughter quieted a little when the children saw a police officer. Some of them stared nervously, others whispered to each other. Daniel felt their fear, and it cut deep. Then, he saw her, Amara. She was sitting at a small table, painting with a group of kids. Her smile was bright and peaceful. When she saw Daniel, her brush froze in her hand. The room grew quiet. Elijah appeared from the back, carrying some boxes. When he saw Daniel, his expression didn't change much. Calm, steady, unreadable. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked toward him. "Officer Briggs," he said evenly. "Didn't expect to see you here." Daniel nodded awkwardly. I came to say sorry. To your sister. To you. To everyone." His voice was low and heavy. "I was wrong. I judged her before I even asked her name." Elijah didn't respond right away. He looked at his sister, who was watching them silently. Then he said, "Amara, do you want to talk to him?" Amara looked at Daniel for a few seconds. Her big brown eyes were kind but cautious. She put her brush down and walked slowly toward him. Daniel knelt down so he could meet her eye level. "I'm sorry, Amara," he said quietly. "I made a mistake. I didn't see you for who you really are." The little girl studied his face. Then she said softly, "It's okay, mister. My brother says people can change if they want to." Her simple words hit Daniel harder than any punishment could. He felt tears sting his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. He nodded, his voice shaking. "He's right," he said, "and I'm going to try." Elijah crossed his arms, but there was no anger in his voice when he spoke. "We're not your enemies, officer. You wear that badge for all of us. If you want to change, this place always needs hands that care more than they judge." Daniel looked around at the children painting, playing, and laughing again. He saw broken furniture being fixed, meals being prepared, and kids smiling at people who believed in them. Something inside him began to shift. "I'd like to help," he said quietly, and he meant it. From that day on, Daniel began coming to the center every weekend. At first, the kids kept their distance, watching him cautiously. But he didn't give up. He painted walls, fixed chairs, and helped carry supplies. He listened more than he talked. Slowly, the children began to trust him. One of them even handed him a paintbrush and said, "You missed a spot, officer." Everyone laughed, and Daniel smiled for the first time in days. Over the next few months, Daniel learned more about Elijah and Amara's story. Their parents had passed away years ago, and Elijah had raised his little sister alone while serving his country and supporting their community. Amara loved drawing, and Elijah made sure she always had colors and paper. Daniel began to understand that being strong wasn't about power, it was about heart. One afternoon, while helping repaint a classroom, Elijah walked over to Daniel. "You've been showing up every weekend," he said. "Most people don't last this long." Daniel smiled faintly. "It's the least I can do," he replied. I can't change the past, but I can try to make the future better. Elijah nodded. That's all anyone can do, he said simply. Keep showing up. Weeks later, the local newspaper came to write an article about the center. The reporter asked to take a picture of everyone together. So they gathered outside, Elijah standing proudly with the children, Amara smiling with her drawings in hand, and Daniel standing beside them. His uniform covered in paint dot, the photo was printed on the front page. The next morning with the headline, "From Mistake to Change, How a Cop Found His Purpose." When Daniel saw it, he felt something warm inside. It wasn't pride. It was peace. For the first time in a long while, he felt he was doing what the badge was meant for: protecting, helping, understanding. Later that evening, he stopped by the park where it had all begun. The swing where Amara once sat was now empty, swaying gently in the breeze. He smiled softly, remembering that day, and whispered to himself, "Thank you, Elijah. Thank you, Amara." He looked up at the sky, painted in orange light as the sun began to set. He realized that change didn't start in laws or uniforms, it started in the heart. And that day, Daniel knew his had changed forever. From that moment on, whenever he saw a child walking alone, he didn't see a suspect. He saw someone's little brother or sister, someone who deserved safety and kindness. Every time he wore his badge, he remembered the little girl on the swing and the man who taught him what real strength looked like. And though the memory of that terrible day would never leave him, it became his greatest lesson, a reminder that one mistake, if faced with honesty and courage, could become the first step toward becoming a better human being.